Hi, my name is Ryan Jacobs, and I have a really exciting video for you today. I had a chance recently to give a lecture to a camera club of mostly digital photographers, and at the end a guy asked me, wait, so you can, even after you've taken the photo and developed the negative, still manipulate your photo? And I had to explain to him, yeah, we go in the darkroom just like you have Lightroom, and you can still dodge and burn, etc., etc. I thought it would be fun to actually show that on YouTube. Now, I know a lot of you watching probably have darkroom experience, but I'm going to take you through how I printed a photo getting it ready for a gallery exhibition, and this one I split filter printed. So this video is basically going to take you through every decision I make in the printing process, starting with after I've already developed the negative. So I think it's going to be really fun. I hope even if you're an experienced darkroom printer, you get something out of it. All right, let's take a look. Okay, here's our negative. This is a 6x7 negative, so I need a 6x7 carrier to put it in. That's going to hold the negative in place. I also have an 11x14 easel. That's the size of the paper that I'm using. And I have a black sheet of cardboard and a grain focuser. I'm going to take that all into the darkroom, along with my paper, which I'm going to store in the drawer to prevent it from being exposed to light. And now I'm going to get the negative into the enlarger. This enlarger is going to project light through the negative down onto the table. Going to lock the negative in place. I'm going to turn off my workstation light and turn on the enlarger, and there's the image. I'm going to open up the aperture all the way so it's very bright now and I can see what I'm doing. And the first decision I need to make is how to crop the image. So for this image, I think I want to use as much area as possible because the negative's pretty good all around. But I did take the photo a little tilted, so I need to correct that now, which means I'll have to crop at least a little bit. So I'm going to line up the edge of the easel with the piano, and then I'm going to raise it back into place. All right, now I'm going to narrow down the aperture to f16. That's what I'll be printing at, which is kind of narrow, by the way. But the reason I do that is because I'm going to have to dodge and burn, and I don't want to be rushed for this image. So I'm being a little conservative with f16, but I think it's better that than the opposite. So now I'm going to cut some test strips, starting with a half sheet of paper, which I'm going to leave in case I need to do some dodging and burning practice. And the rest I'll cut into strips, and if I don't use that big half sheet, I'll just save it for a future print. Okay, so let's make our first test strip here. I'm going to split filter this, so this is the magenta number 5 filter. That's going to be a high contrast image. It's going to expose the shadows. And from left to right, it's going to be 15 seconds up to 64 seconds for this test strip. And I'm doing half-stop increments here, so the time is changing just a little bit each time. And then horizontally, I'm going to do the 00 filter. That's the yellow low contrast filter for 16 seconds. And that's going to expose the highlights just a bit. So then after I run it through the chemistry and take it out into the light, this is what it looks like. And you can see up top the highlights are a little more exposed than they are on the bottom. Although I wasn't totally happy with this, so I did another test strip with the same shadows, but this time I used the yellow filter for 45 seconds all the way around. And you can see the highlights are looking a lot better here. So I'm going to go back in the darkroom and I'm going to make a third test strip using a different part of the image, because I want to make sure it looks good everywhere. And this one, I used shadows for 40 seconds, so 40 with the magenta filter, and highlights for 50 seconds with the yellow filter. And by the way, I blasted the right side of this test strip with really bright light because I want to see what pure black looks like. And you can see, compared to the guy's hat, we're looking pretty good within the image. That said, I don't love how the highlights look here. If you look at the sheet music, you can't really read it all that well. So I did one final test strip where I upped the highlights, and I did up the shadows just a little bit as well. So this last test strip was 45 seconds magenta and 75 seconds yellow. And that's looking pretty good. So that's what I chose for my first work print. Okay, so here we go, the first full sheet of paper. And the work print, I'm not going to do any dodging and burning here. I'm just going to do magenta for 45 seconds and yellow for 75 seconds, and that's it. Because I want to see what it looks like without any manipulations. That's the only way I can reasonably decide what manipulations to do. Now, occasionally the work print looks pretty good, but that's rare. So I'm not expecting this to be any great work of art here. All right, so let's take this out of the easel and walk it over to the development line. I'm going to stick it in the developer. And by the way, I like to watch it as it develops because I can often tell whether I've exposed it properly based on how long it takes for the first shadows to appear in the image. And that's because the Harvey Milk Center, where I'm working here, they are very consistent with the development chemistry that they use. It's the same dilution every time, and so I've just learned to judge what a good print looks like in terms of how long it takes to develop. So you can develop that skill yourself as well, as long as you use consistent chemistry. So it's coming out of the stop bath here, it's going in the fixer, and we're going to walk it out into the light. And you can see it's a little underexposed all around. Up top there, the sun is pure white, and the shadows, like on the piano and the guy, they're not really doing their shadow thing as much as I'd like. So I'm gonna up the magenta time to 65 seconds and the yellow time to 95 seconds. And I also made some dodging and burning notes, which we'll come back to in a little bit. But now I wanna show you my first real print that I'm gonna try to make. And I made one more adjustment here too, by the way. I got in a little closer with the crop, and I also fixed the horizon just a bit. I realized that my strategy of lining up with the piano wasn't quite perfect, since the piano actually should have been a little tilted in the image. So I made it better here. But I didn't change it enough to change the exposure. I just needed to refocus. Okay, so here comes the cool part. And by the way, make sure to turn your aperture back down again. I've made that mistake before after redoing the focus. So we're at f16. I've got a full sheet of paper. And now I'm going to show you a split screen. So on the left is what I'm actually doing, and on the right is what's happening to the paper as a result. So here is the magenta filter. Remember, this is 65 seconds. But I'm going to dodge some areas of the image, starting with the piano, and that's because I want to see the pianist's hands reflected in that piano. If I didn't do this, it would just all go to black, and you wouldn't have that fun little Easter egg in the image. I'm also going to do the guy's pants and his hat a little bit, because I don't want those to go totally dark, as well as the legs of the piano bench. So we're dodging all of that. And now we're going to switch over to the yellow filter. So now we are affecting the highlights of the image mainly. And I did the yellow filter for 95 seconds, but then this is additional time on top of that. I am burning in the sky, starting with the upper left corner and some of the grass on the left side of the image. And I'm going to burn this for about 30 seconds before I switch to the right side of the image for another 30 seconds. So this is going to get that sky nice and detailed instead of pure white. The sun was reflecting off the grass too, so I'm fixing some of that as well. And next, I'm going to do the top half of the image, burning this in, again to fix the sky. But this image was interesting because there was a tree line up top, and so the brightest part was actually this strip in the middle. So I did that for a little extra time. That's why I'm using my arm there. Finally, I'm burning in a little patch of the sky and then a few of the umbrellas. So this is a sheet of paper with a hole in it, so I can get really detailed about where my burns are going. All right, so now we're going to walk it over to the developer and take a look. In it goes. Here it comes. Hey, there's our image. Oh, you can already see this is a better print. Yeah, so look at the grass here. You can see all the detail. Look up top, you can really see those trees way more than you could before. The umbrellas look a lot nicer. Yeah, this is just better all around. So let's get it into the fixer and then take it out into the light. There it is. So I did make a couple minor tweaks after this, and I printed 2 more images. Those were my final ones, but for all intents and purposes, this is what the final image looked like. Beautiful. Okay, so let's finish this image. I have a sheet of dry mount tissue on top of my photograph, and the photograph has been washed and dried, by the way. And I'm going to use this tacking iron to tack the dry mount tissue onto the photograph. So this tissue is adhesive when heat touches it. That's why I'm using this hot iron to adhere the tissue to the photo. And you can see that I've been successful. So now I have a mat that I've cut for this photo, along with a backing board, and the next step is to line everything up. So I'm going to put my wallet down on top of the photo to hold it in place. I'm going to make sure it's where I want it to be, so that the window of my mat does not reveal any of the edges of the photograph. That looks good there. Now I can lift the mat off, and I'm going to tack down the photograph to the backing board by way of the dry mount tissue. And now I'm going to tack down the dry mount tissue to the backing board. And I like to kind of stretch out the dry mount tissue as I do this. If you don't do that, you sometimes get wrinkles that show through to the photograph, and that's bad. So make sure the dry mount tissue is totally flat when you're tacking down each corner. And so you can see what we're doing here. We're making a 3-layer sandwich. The dry mount tissue is attached at the corners to the backing board, and the photograph is attached to the dry mount tissue in the center. So that way everything is held together and it's ready for the dry mount press. This is a dry mount press. It's basically a big hot plate. And we're going to put our photograph sandwich in there, and we're going to clamp it down and leave it for about 1 minute. And that heat will activate the adhesive in the dry mount tissue, making it adhere all around. So after 1 minute, I'm going to check to see if I've been successful. And in this case, I mostly have been, but on that bottom edge, it's rippling a little bit. So I'm going to turn it around, kind of like you're baking cookies in the oven. Sometimes what happens is the heat doesn't get distributed evenly all the way to the bottom edge. So I find if I turn it around, usually that solves the issue. I'm just going to do that for 1 more minute. Let's check it. And yeah, this looks a lot better. So the final step here is I'm going to put it in a cold press. So this is the same machine, I just haven't turned it on. And we're going to clamp that down. And the reason is, if you don't do this step, sometimes what happens is your backing board ends up curling up on you. It doesn't lay flat. So I usually leave it in here for about half an hour if I can, if no one else is waiting to use the machine. And there you go, you can see it's lying totally flat and it's ready to frame. So last step is I'm going to take some tape and I'm going to tape a hinge along the top edge. And I use Filmoplast P90 tape. Some people use Linen Artist's tape. You have some different choices here. Now I'm going to put some tape in the corners and close everything up. And there is our beautiful matted photograph. Ta-da! Hey, so by the way, I want to look at the photo one more time and just tell you a little bit about the dodging and burning notes that I made. So first, I thought about the notes for the shadows, in other words, the magenta filter. That's where I was dodging. And so I did 15 seconds on the left side of the piano, another 15 seconds on the right side of the piano, 15 seconds on the guy's pants, about 5 seconds on his hat, and then like 2 or 3 seconds on the legs of the piano bench. And you can see the results, right? So like I said, you can see the reflection of the pianist's hands in the piano. The guy's hat has a little texture, his pants have a little texture, and the piano legs don't look totally black. So you can kind of see the hinge a little better. That was the idea. And then both the left and the right side of the image, particularly where you see grass and then the top corners of the image, I burned those for 30 seconds on the yellow filter, on both sides, 30 seconds. And then on top of that, I did an additional 15 seconds burning basically the top half of the image, plus like 5 seconds more with my arm covering the top. And so all of that together, you can see the effect in this photo, right? You can see those trees, there's nice shadow detail. You can see all the grass and the people. You can see their faces a little bit better. And there's nothing in the image that's like super bright. Even that patch in the top right where the sun is peeking through, there's a little bit of tone there, so it's perfect. And then the shadows really are shadowy. There are some pure blacks in the image, especially if you look at the piano itself. In particular, the very top of the piano, right at the top edge of the image, that's a good example of pure black. But you can still see shadow detail everywhere you want it. And so that's the effect of dodging and burning, and that's why we're doing all of this. So if you've been wondering how analog photographers manipulate their images post-capture, now you know. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like it and subscribe to my channel. You'll be notified when I release future videos, and it's just a cool thing to do. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.